All right, hey guys, happy Friday. I had a couple questions on this homework that I sent out yesterday. So I thought I would walk you through this. I know I gave you some written directions, but again, sometimes written directions don't come across quite as well as I hope they would. As I hope they would. So I wanted to walk you through this. I'm not going to do the entire worksheet, but I hopefully do enough to get you started here. So um, what we're doing is putting this information here into our graphing calculators, and then looking to see if we can model this, all right, with some sort of equation that helps us predict what's going to happen here. And then, I just chose this idea of the mean annual temperature of the Earth. So let's take a look at this. So this is your X and this is your Y. All right. So the first thing we want to do is put this stuff in our calculator. All right. So I've got my calculator here. Let me get back to this home screen here for you. All right. I'm going to go through this, as slowly as I can, but again, feel free to pause. Email me with questions. And again, this should just go right along with the written directions that I gave you. So the first thing I want to do is put these in here. So I got to get to my list. All right. So to do that, I hit stat, and then I want to edit. All right. And if there's anything in those lists, now you see I've already got this information in those lists. I'm going to clear this out and just do it again from scratch just so you guys can see it. But if you would happen to have information maybe from something else that we've done in there, you can clear all that out by just scrolling up, and you see that L1 is highlighted. And now if I hit my clear button and hit enter, it'll wipe out that whole list. All right. So I'm going to go over to L2. I've got L2 highlighted here. And I'm just going to clear out that whole list. All right. So now I want to enter this information into my list. All right. So in my list one, I want to enter all these values. So I'm counting by 10. All right. All the way up to 130. All right. So I'm highlighted right there. So I'm just going to hit 10 and hit enter. 20, 30, and continue on until I've got all those in there. 80. There's 100, 110, 120, and then finally 130. All right. And now if I go over to list two, it should take me right up to the start here. And now I just want to enter these numbers here. All right. So just be careful as you're doing that. These aren't quite as regular as those. So you just don't want to make any mistakes, leave out a decimal point, or leave out a digit. So just be careful here. I'm just going to move this piece of paper so I can see it as I'm entering it. All right. So 56.71, 56.74, 56.73, and so on. All right, it'll take me just a minute to get these entered in here. $57.2, 57.52, 57.76, and then finally 58.12. And I just want to make sure that my lists have the same number in them. That way I didn't skip one. I mean, you should have the same amount in each list. All right. Okay, so we've got those lists entered now. All right. So what I want to do now is make a scatter plot of this data. All right, so let's look and see what's going on here. All right, so what I want to hit is this stat plot in blue. So since it's in blue, I need to hit second. And then if I hit Y equals, it'll take me to this menu. And it doesn't matter if you put it in 1, 2, or 3. I'm gonna put it in number 1. All right, and I get some options here. I want to hit enter to turn that on. The type is my scatter plot. That's what I want here, and it's already highlighted. I want my X list to be list 1. I want my Y list to be list 2, and you can choose which kind of mark you want here. I'm just going to stick with that mark there. All right. Now, before we graph this thing, because your window might be all messed up from previous ones that we've done, it's always nice to have it set our window based on what's in our list. So if you hit zoom, and then you can either hit number 9 or scroll down to number 9. All right, and that's zoom stat, and that'll automatically set our window to match the data that we enter. Okay, so now we've got our scatter plot for this. Here's the years, and here's the temperature. Okay, And so now we're on step 3 in your written directions there if you're paying attention to that. We're going to be doing several types of regressions here to see what sort of graph matches this best. All right. Is this a linear graph? Is it a quadratic? Is it a parabola? Is it an exponential graph? What sort of graph best matches these? Okay. So I'm going to walk you through maybe the first couple. All right. And then, hopefully you'll be able to pick it up from there. Okay. So the first one we're going to do is what's called a linear regression. Okay. So I'm gonna hit stat, and then I'm gonna arrow over to calculate. And you look at number 4 down there. It's a linear regression. Okay, this is gonna try to match up our data with a line. All right, so I hit enter, and there's not a whole lot to do here at this point. All right, I want my X list to be list 1, my Y list to be list 2. Don't worry about that frequency. Don't worry about storing the equation yet. Let's just go ahead and calculate. Okay, and it says, hey, here's the equation, and here was what I wanted you to write down. Okay, this R squared value. All right, so we're going to look later what that entails. Now I'd ask you to go 4 places past the decimal. So for a linear, and you see on the 3rd page, I've got this chart here. So the type of regression, this was a linear regression. The R squared value, we're going to round that 4 places past the decimal. So 0.857, well, that 7 would bump that 9 up, but it can't. So it's 0.8580. All right, so that's what I'm going to fill in there, 0.8580 for my linear. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing for quadratic. All right, so again, I'm going to hit my stat. I'm going to go over to calculate. And now I'm going to go down to number 5, which is my quadratic. All right, whoops, went too far. All right, and now it's going to try to match up that same scatter plot we did, but now it's going to try to match it up with a quadratic equation, an x squared equation. All right, so again, there's really nothing I need to do. List 1, list 2 is x and y. I don't need to worry about my frequency. I don't need to store it at this point. I just want to calculate, and it'll think for a little bit, and then again, there's that R squared value. So this to 4 places past the decimal is 0.9198. All right, so 0.9198. Okay, and then what I want you to do, I'm not gonna do the rest of these, but I want you to do the same thing with a cubic, with a quartic, with a natural logarithmic, and with an exponential. And again, for each one of those, you just hit stat, go over to calculate, and you notice they're right. I put them right in order for you. So there's the cubic, number 6. There's the quartic. Scroll down a little bit. We're not going to do number 8. There's the natural linear progression or natural logarithmic progression or regression, and then there's our exponential. Okay, and for each of those, I'm looking for the R squared value. All right. Now I will tell you, when you get back to that calculate menu, I think on one of them you can't see R squared, but if you scroll down, it's going to give you a bunch of information. If you scroll down, you should be able to find that on each one. Okay, so that's what I wanted filled in on this first chart. Okay, and then you're simply going to look at which one of these, once you get all this finished, which one of these had the highest R squared value. All right. In this case, out of these 2, it's my quadratic. Now there might be one later that gets a little bit higher value than that. I'm not going to ruin the surprise for you there, but that's what I want there. Okay, and then we're going to graph that line. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do that. Now again, I'm going to do it for my quadratic just because that's the highest one I have so far, but there might be one. I'm pretty sure there is one higher than a quadratic once we get here. But once you determine which one has your highest R squared value, we're going to graph that line. Okay, so here's how we go about doing that. So again, let me take you back to where we started here. All right, second quit. All right, so I want to graph that line now. So I'm going to hit my stat, and I'm going to go over to calculate. And again, I'm doing the quadratic one. All right, you're going to want to do the regression that had the highest R squared value, but just for me right now in my table, I'm just going to do the quadratic one as an example. So I hit enter. It's that same menu I came up with before. But now if I want to graph this, I'm going to scroll down to store regression equation. And we can actually have it store that regression equation so it'll graph it for us. All right. So once I've got my cursor here at store regression equation, I'm going to go to my variables menu, VARS. I'm going to hit that. I'm going to go over to Y variables. And then I'm going to hit 1 because I want function, and I want it to put this equation in Y1. All right, so I'm going to hit 1 again, and now it should say, hey, I'm going to store this equation that I come up with in Y1. And we go ahead and calculate it again. And again, we see that same information, but now it's going to store all this in Y1. And as a matter of fact, if I hit Y equals, you see that equation in there now, all those numbers in there. And now if I hit graph, I don't have to hit zoom 9 anymore because it's already set up for me. I can just hit graph and it'll show you not only your scatter plot, but now this line that kind of is supposed to fit that data. Okay. And so that's I just walked you through that. All right, nothing to write down there. I just want you to look at that, okay, and see what's happening there. So now, what I've asked you to do, okay, is now which one has your lowest R squared value. So you come back here and you've already graphed the one that had the highest R squared value. Now find the one that has the lowest R squared value, and I want you to graph that one. Okay, you can and put it under Y2 under that variables menu. That way it'll graph both of those lines. And now as you look at those two graphs, what do you think R squared means? Now I'm not asking you to tell me what these numbers mean. But for example, what does it mean that this number is higher than that number? What does R squared have to do with these lines? All right, so, and I think once you get these two, your highest R squared and your lowest R squared, hopefully you'll be able to see that. Okay? And then the last thing, last thing here that I want you to do is we're going to answer some questions using that graph. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is get rid of your lowest R squared value. We want to focus on that highest R squared value. So you just scroll down to Y2 and hit clear, and then hit graph again, and you should get this. All right. Now again, it might not be the quadratic one that has your highest R squared value, but you should get just back to this graph with your scatter plot. Okay, and now we can start answering some questions. It says, according to your graph, what should the global mean temperature be in 2020? Because you see, if you go back to our table, this only goes up to the year 2000. All right, so please let me point this out because you guys might be wondering. I lost a bet. All right, so I had to have my nails done. And I've just left it on there. It's it's the quarantine time, so yeah, nice pretty nail there. So no, yeah. Just figured I'd point out the obvious. All right, so where were we? Oh, yeah. So we have, we're looking, this has gone up through the year 2000. What should the temperature have been in 2020? Okay, that's the question we're answering here. So the first thing you have to decide is what X is. Now, X in our table was years since 1870. So in 2020, how long had it been, or what should that value of X be? Okay, well, I'm going to go back. I'm going to hit second quit. And if I want to find out what X should be, I'm going to do 2020 minus 1870. All right. So it's been 150 years since 1870. That's going to be my X value. All right. So what I want to do. All right. So, I just gave you the answer there. You are welcome. All right. So now, if I go back to this, all right, let me show you what happens here. If I go back to my graph, okay. And I try to do this without this next step. Watch what happens. So again, I'm going to go to second and calculate. And I want to calculate, number one, I want to calculate the value. And I want to see where this thing is when X equals 150. Because we just said, hey, that's the X value I'm looking at. And if I hit enter, it says, wait a minute, I can't do that. And that's because my window isn't set. My window, my graph, let me quit here. My graph doesn't go up to 150. All right, it won't calculate that unless your graph actually shows that. So here's how we fix that. You go to window, and right now my X max is at 142. I want it to at least include 150. I usually go a little bit past it, so I'm going to say, hey, make sure this thing goes up to at least 160. All right, and now when I graph it, you might see a slight difference there, all right, because we slid that window over from 142 to 160. But now if I go to second trace, which is where my calculate menu is, and I want to calculate the value, so either hit 1 or hit enter, and now I can type in 150, and it'll say, hey, at 150, your Y value, your temperature should be about 58.4. Okay, now let me just point out here. Nope, there it is. All right. That is not your answer for here because you're probably not going to have this quadratic on here. I'm telling you right now, I'm almost sure one of those other regressions is going to have a higher R squared value than this. I'm just walking you through the process, but that's how you determine that temperature. Okay. And then on the back side, it says, okay, well, what will it be in 2120? All right. So again, first thing you're going to have to do is figure out what your X value is. Then go to your window and make sure your window includes that. And then go to that second calculate and calculate the value. Okay. And see what, according to this graph, what should the temperature be 100 years from now? And then simply, do you think this is a good estimate? All right, as time goes on, there's really not a right answer here to this. I just want to see what you're thinking. Do you think that this graph here is going to provide a good estimate for what global temperatures are going to be as time goes on? So in other words, is that answer you got for 2120, do you think that's accurate? All right, and then just tell me why or why not. All right, so I hope that helped. Again, I know there was a lot of confusion with this, but I hope that this helped here. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. I'll be more than happy to do whatever it takes to help you guys finish this up. All right, have a good weekend. Take care. We'll see you guys later.